Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Inforunners podcast. And today we're going to be talking about something different than what you're probably thinking about. You're probably going, oh, they're going to talk about the X1 today, but we are not going to talk about the X1 today.
Yeah, the X1's unfortunately, it was a bit of a mere concept. We didn't have much to say about it. And the few thoughts that I did have, if you watch STL Youngbug's first video on the X1, pretty much sums up what I was thinking. And so, like, if we don't really have anything to say that hasn't already been said, there's not much point in us making a video about it.
But it is important to mention, while we don't think it has a niche, it is an average ship, and there's nothing wrong with there being average ships out there. There's average cars and other average things out there in life. So we're going to leave it at that. We have gotten some new hardware, and we're still trying to get that all in there, and some new software pieces. So everything from some new audio equipment to actually we're trying out being able to do green screen without a green screen. So
just hang on with us for that. You know, if Dyson disappears like a ghost, don't get scared.
So we're going to be talking about today fleet planning and balancing all of that out.
Yeah, it's sort of the idea. If you have a big military, you should be planning on how to make it pay to make it work. And if you have a very economic, like industry fleet, you should be planning to have an appropriate military to best maximize the risk versus reward sort of curve that Star Citizen is planning for its economy.
Yes, and it's really important to note out there that there's way too many groups out there that think they're going to make a ton of money being a PMC, private military corporation. It doesn't quite work that way, especially on a larger scale. It works when you're a little bit smaller or if all of your people are well known. But the big issue is most large orgs and everything are going to have good people. We're talking about good pilots, good Marines, people that they're not really going to have to reach out. And if they do have to reach out for certain specialized things, they're only going to be reaching out into that top 1 or 2%. So those groups are not going to have the best profit earning, in addition to the fact that them not being balanced out is going to make military operations very costly.
It's also the complete lack of mobility. I mean, at the end of the day, they want to go out and play right now. They have to wait for some other group to give them a contract. If they've already got an internal industry-based part of their group, they can just go out immediately and sort of support what they want to do, when they want to do, where they want to go. And so that gives them the sort of freedom to be able to do what they want at the level they want, as opposed to being dictated by whatever they can find. And so yeah, this video very much promotes the idea of having a good fleet economy.
Yes, and to open this up, we're going to talk about an example which you can take all of what we're saying and bounce it off of. And that is, let's say there's a Vandal fleet out there and you're told by the UE, hey, we're going to pay you X amount to go do that. Get rid of it. Well, you could just go out there and go get rid of it with your military, but having an industry base in whatever group you are means you can have several reclaimers and a couple holes there to pick up all that wreckage and turn that into even more profit. Or even make it so, let's say you're an industry-based group, you go out into that same Vandal space and reclaim a whole bunch of wreckage from a previous battle. You're going to have that military wing to back you up.
It's the idea that for a maximized business case for both military or an industry-based group, you need to have a balance in order to realize those greater rewards. Because when you accept a greater risk, that's where the greater profits and returns are going to be.
Infinitely scaling, practically.
And it also covers the idea that, you know, a military that balances industry will be stronger, better provisioned, have better upgrades on their ships and with equipment because they can afford to do so. They're not just getting by under their military contracts. They're earning money hand over fist because they're making the best of this risk versus reward economy. And that allows them to be much stronger than another sort of PMC military group who is, you know, picking up the scraps left and right and when it's available to them, and as opposed to being able to plan their economic case for their group and maximizing that potential.
And the same works for economy. Being able to have your military wing not only means you can offset the cost that you normally have to do, which could be fairly absorbent for escorts, but also it means you have that military ready and available when you want to take those missions into risky space for mining, salvage, all of that.
So I guess now we're going to get into different levels of sort of fleet planning. Sort of like the smaller, and then we'll move on to the larger org level.
The smaller level is amazing because that's where most people are going to be at. And regardless on whether you have a lot of money to spend or a little bit, it's all going to be about finding out what your members have and balancing it out. And a good example of that is the group that I'm with. Or was with before I joined Solar.org, we basically were like, hey, well, I'm going to get your scout. The other person is going to get the recovery ship. One person is going to go get the mining ship. One person, several people are going to be our military. And we all have that balanced out ahead of time, so that way we don't all end up with 10 Carracks.
Yeah, this is sort of like, well, take my Carrack out today. No, it's my Carrack. I'll escort you with the Carrack. It's like, so no, it's like if you say I'm getting the industry and you're going to get the military, and together we form a team, and that makes that group a competitive group if they've got that right balance. But it gets much more complicated on an org level. With an org level, it has a huge level of individuals with many very different sorts of interests. And I've looked at quite a few different orgs, and when you look at the balance of which ships, it's like they have shitloads of Carracks, Reclaimers, and Orions, and a whole bunch of military ships, like shit tons of military ships. But then they don't have many of the lesser known things like the Crucibles. They have almost shit all hull D and E's, which is a really important part of sort of the cycle for larger organized groups. We'll get that to that a little bit later. But they're often quite imbalanced. Not all orgs are completely unbalanced, but some are like, I don't know, like 80 to 90% military, or they have no interest in military and they have just economic type things like tons of Reclaimers or tons of Orions. And that's fine because that's their focus. But at the end of the day, they need to think about the other side of the coin and balance that a little better.
Because again, your most profit is going to be gained by going into those risky areas if you're economic. And if you're military, your best profit is going to be gained when working as a joint operation with support. In large organizations, one thing I do also want to say is a lot of people are focusing on the ships and not also working on making sure they have enough people to fill those ships. That's just something you also have to be thinking about when you're planning, because when you're looking at this, you need to balance your fleet out in such a way that you can also say, hey, if you don't have your ship going out, let's move you over into here, because you have to have those boots in your ship to be able to make it work efficiently. And another thing, work with your whales, because if you have a shortage of one ship that you need, they might readjust some of their stuff to help balance it out in the org.
Ways to find out which shortage of ships you have in an org is normally used fleet surveys, where you actually survey everyone what ships they have. From there, you can identify things like critical shortages, what you are lacking, how are you going to either protect or fund these other military ships to do work together as a team. And then, like you said, whales can help with that. They have a larger amount of multiple ships. They are better positioned to melt and sort of remake and position their fleet to better accommodate the org in their sort of shortages, something that which single individuals who, have their one cherished ship less likely to be able to sacrifice themselves for. So, by having this sort of a talk, a conversation, realizing where your weak points are, and allows an org to consider to reposition itself.
And orgs that not only are taking into account planning and what materials they have, but also investing in training their people will do way better than orgs that have everything to start with. Because if I have a bunch of starter ships, but I've already planned, well, once the game starts, we're going to work toward this, this, and this, and I've trained my people up, that teamwork, that organization is going to be way more valuable than someone that has, let's say, 50 ships, and they're all doing 50 different things.
Another thought is that, like, I know some organizations that you have to have a competitive fighter or we don't even want you. That's the sort of thing they are. Or, like, you know, they boast how many Aoras or how many Hornets or Sabres they have. When you think about it, small ships like personal fighters are actually not that important to have going into the game, because, like, in the first 2-3 weeks, I guarantee you most people will buy, fashion, and upgrade and customize their own personal fighter. You know, if you're thinking of a critical shortage, you should be looking at things like, do I have enough scouts? Do we have enough terrapins? Not everyone's going to get a personals, and whole Ds and Es. You know, these are things not everyone is going to buy a personal ship of. And, you know, maybe that's where you need to better focus your efforts. Yeah. And going on from the whole E and Ds, once you start getting into larger organized groups, these ships are really important. Because let's say you take 3 Orions out into space, and then you escort one of those with a Polaris and several fighters. Having that hull E to come in, unload that ore, allowing the Orions to stay indefinitely mining, and then it being escorted back to offload its load. These are really critical, pumping the most out of an economic situation. It makes you truly competitive. There's no downtime. And the thing is, many groups don't plan to have hull E's in their lineup. If they do, they only have a couple.
But the
or maybe
Hull E
1 or 2.
Is one of the best ships, because they've even talked about it being able to be used as a refueling platform. So even if you're a military org and not even worried about what we're talking about, and you're like, they don't know anything, still have a Hull E or D lying around, because you can use it as a refueling platform and a rearming platform, as weird as that sounds.
Yet in large organizations, this is one of the single most neglected ships. It's the sort of ship that people as an individual go, it's too big a ship just for me. I'm going to get something else. So, you know, maybe you should be really looking closely. If you're planning to run 30 to 50 people on an operation, this is one of those ships you need to have.
So guys, essentially it's plan, train, and best know where to put your people, because otherwise all of these ship concept sales and everything that you guys are buying into are to mean nothing. All this metagaming is going to mean absolutely nothing if you don't have the infrastructure to back it up. So guys, let us know what you think. We'd love to read your comments. We always try to keep up with them as best we can. I know we're not as diligent as we used to be, because we've been really, really busy lately with real life, but we still read them. We still try to respond when we can.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, catch you around.
See you around.